One of the things that I think about the most is developing people is one of the best, I think most rewarding investments. As I've kind of gone through this startup journey, it's having all these people with different backgrounds and expertises is so great and helpful.
Welcome to Benchling's Founders Chat, where we learn how top biotech founders are shaping the future of life sciences in this monthly series. I'm your host, Sean McCormack, and I lead emerging professional services and industry solutions here at Benchling. This month, it is my pleasure to be joined by Dr. Tammy Hsu. Tammy completed her PhD in bioengineering at the University of California, Berkeley, where she published the scientific basis for Huue during one of her PhD projects. Huue uses synthetic biology to create the world's most sustainable dyes, with their first focus being indigo blue for denim makers. The unique technology powering this sustainable dye production has earned Tammy multiple accolades in the press, from MIT Technology Review's 35 Innovators Under 35 to Inc.'s Female Founders 100, and has helped Huue recruit a star-studded advisory board that includes the CTO of Bolt Threads, along with Adriano Goldschmied, who's known as the godfather of denim. With the support of world-class institutions and investors ranging from IndieBio to Fashion for Good, to the Melinda Gates and M12 Female Founders Foundation, Tammy and Huue are poised to make a big impact in both biotechnology and the sustainable fashion movement. Welcome, Tammy. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Sean.
Tammy, before we get started, could you just share a little more background on yourself with the audience?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy. I'm the CSO and co-founder here at Huue. And Hue's mission is really to provide more sustainable dyes and colorants for any industry that needs colors. And we're starting with indigo for the textile industry. And in my role, I basically oversee kind of all of the R&D, product development, and all of the manufacturing for our first product, as well as our pipeline of new dye colors as well. My background is really in bioengineering and synthetic biology. So I joined a synthetic biology lab when I was in undergrad and loved it so much that I wanted to continue doing research. And I also went to UC Berkeley to do a PhD, also in a kind of microbial engineering lab. That's when I started working on this project that became kind of our first dye molecule, indigo. And though I have kind of a background in more on the bench work and engineering microbes, biochemistry kind of side, I've learned so much about kind of industrial bioprocessing ever since kind of starting the company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Tammy. At Benchling, we see a lot of emerging startups, many doing interesting things, but I think Huue is, very unique at being at the intersection of both biotechnology, synthetic biology, and then the fashion industry. You mentioned that you had been kind of starting this project in your PhD program. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the project came to be, how you got started on creating synthetic indigo?
Yeah. So when I was starting out in my PhD program, I was really interested in kind of discovering something new about the natural world and new natural products, biosynthesis and things like that, but also kind of engineering it into something that's useful for humanity and for the world. And so when I joined John Duber's lab, there was this idea kind of floating around. There was an iGEM team working on making indigo precursors in microbes, and so there was a key enzyme that was needed to kind of complete this pathway. And so that's really where I got my start in the lab, finding this enzyme that was unknown. And as I kind of was going through the kind of protein biochemistry and scientific side, I kept kind of reading more about really the harms of indigo synthesis these days. It's made using this chemical synthesis that's really really nasty for the environment and for dye workers. And so and there was always kind of this industry interest, right? People would hear about this project of biosynthesized indigo, and brands would kind of come knocking and see, is this something that we can have? How much can you make? Can you make this many quantities? And so this kind of industry interest was always there for a biosynthesized indigo product. And so as I was kind of like progressing in my PhD program, technologically, it also looked very promising. Um, and there was also a little bit of kind of like potential for expanding into other colors as well. And so as I kind of neared the end of my PhD program, that's when I was kind of thinking this could be a really good opportunity as a company.
Yeah. I think when you say industry interest, are these like denim manufacturers that were approaching you during your PhD program? Is it Adriana Goldschmied? Like, who is it at that time?
Yeah, so at that time, so there was I think there was like an article published online about the work that was being done in the lab, and so a couple of denim brands were kind of emailing, especially my advisor, and saying, "Where's the like status of this project? We want to like keep kind of tabs on it and kind of follow along, and in some ways, kind of like help support." As this project grows. It was really cool. I went to some kind of like industry conferences as well, or like trade shows, to learn about the denim industry and textile industry, especially even as a grad student, which was really, really exciting and very different, I think.
Yeah, totally. It's certainly very unique. Okay, so then you're kind of ending your PhD. You know that this might have wings. That this project. You have interest from industry. What is like that next step where you take it from kind of academia to the company?
Yeah, so I think I think I was very kind of lucky to be in the UC Berkeley environment. So I don't know if it's really the same at other universities, but I think at Berkeley there's a lot of kind of startup energy. There's kind of a lot and increasing amounts of resources for people who want to spin out a company. There were like a couple of programs that were starting out that were really helpful for kind of me to learn about what it means to start a company, and also even our lab is the lab I was in was very kind of like industrially focused and
Yeah.
interested in kind of the practicalities of the science. And so other people in the lab had also kind of like started companies, and it was um, kind of interesting as a kind of like a guidebook a little bit for me. But when it came to kind of like graduating and seeing if I could kind of like start a company off of this technology, one of the first things I wanted to do was basically kind of team up with a co-founder. And I was really lucky to be connected with Michelle Zhu, who is the now CEO and co-founder of Huue. She's the now wife of one of my old lab mates. And so I was really lucky that she's very like orthogonal to me and in terms of personality and background. She has a business background, family connections in denim, and the
Oh,
textile
wow.
industry. So it was really, really a perfect fit.
Yeah, it sounds like a great match. And so did you find Michelle before, like in the process of founding the company? Did you found it together? I know that you did some work at Indie Bio. Can you talk about that part?
Yeah. So when I was kind of like graduating and moving and making my way out of the academic nest, one of the other kind of big kind of like hurdles, I guess, is like how do we get funding to
Yeah.
prove out some of these concepts, get kind of investor interest and really move the company along. And so we applied for Indie Bio as it's a startup accelerator in San Francisco. Now they have a branch in New York as well. And we uh, yeah, we really thought that the accelerator route made a lot of sense, partly because they gave us a little bit of initial seed funding or initial kind of like pre-seed funding, I think,
Yeah.
and also had a lab space for us to like try out a couple of different ideas, even though we were only two people at the time, and also really kind of gave us a bit of a crash course in how to talk to investors, how to like really be in the kind of like startup world. Yeah, as both kind of like first time founders, we really thought that was a good route for us and continue to benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot to learn. I think at that time, it's very exciting. So you're two people. You're working at Indie Bio. Can you just like talk us through what a day was like at that time? Are you raising money and then going back and doing experiments? Like making pitch decks? Can you
Yeah,
just talk us through that?
yeah, I would say it was maybe a little bit different. I would say like since the Indie Bio days, I would say like me and Michelle have kind of diverged in terms of our like kind of like expertise and what we kind of focus on. And back then it was probably a lot more kind of mixed together. I would say it generally we were kind of both iterating on pitch decks, especially Michelle, and like practicing like what is the story of our company, and how do we tell this story in a compelling way to investors. And kind of on my side, I was also really focused on providing or generating kind of a proof of concept for our first product, Indigo. And I think when we were just starting out, as maybe happens a lot in academic environments, like it's like, okay, I've made this engineered strain that can produce my target molecule, but it isn't such that you can just drop this target molecule into the supply chain, right? You have to like purify it, you have to make it into a product that people can use. And so I would say most of my time at IndieBio was focused on kind of scaling up our technology to a point where we could make a tiny bit of kind of proof of concept material, and we were able to try it out on a very, very small kind of like denim dye range, a prototype dye range, and we're able to make real kind of denim yarns, indigo dye denim yarns. And so that was kind of the technical culmination of IndieBio for us.
Tammy, do you have a pair of Huue dyed denim jeans?
So it's interesting that, because like denim is actually dyed. The reason that I think denim is a good target and also maybe a little bit challenging is that so denim is actually dyed at the yarn level, which is all of the kind of threads that are woven together to make the fabric, because one side is blue, one side is white. And so you actually need kind of a lot of dye to make real denim. We do have a pair of denim jeans in our lab right now that is kind of like the whole fabric was dyed with our indigo, and that was really exciting. It's not real denim, but it's definitely really, really cool to see.
That's so cool. Okay, so you're at IndieBio, you're scaling up. I think at this time Huue had a different name, and it was Tinctorium, which I believe is named for the indigo plant. So can you talk us through kind of transitioning from making indigo to making colors?
Yeah, so when we first started out, I would say like we were really focused, and I think continue to be focused on this first product of making indigo for the denim industry. Back in when I was kind of first incorporating the company, it was Tinctorium because, as you mentioned, that's kind of where we were looking at. It's kind of like this was a plant that we were studying a lot to figure out some of the genes that were involved in the biosynthesis of indigo. But as we were kind of growing, it became clear that there's kind of a lot of other opportunities as well that are in other colorants that are related to indigo or related to the biosynthesis pathway of indigo that could be interesting for the textile industry, food industry, potentially others as well. And Tinctorium, while being, I thought, really cool for like the nerdy scientist people, was maybe not necessarily that great for interfacing with like kind of brands and external parties, and also was a little bit more limited to just indigo. And so, I think it was like around in 2020 or 2021, I think, we rebranded to Huue to really kind of showcase our desire to expand out to kind of all colors and biosynthesized dyes in general.
Yeah. I guess on the subject of brand, our marketing team is very impressed with Hue's marketing team, because you can find things about your company and PR all over the place. What has been your strategy to sort of get your name and your reputation out there? Talking about what Hue's doing online, because you've done a great job of it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're very flattered that you guys have noticed our marketing efforts. I think we have. I would say, like from the beginning, we've really kind of recognized that it's important to kind of, for us especially, to build a strong brand, especially since our products are kind of very customer adjacent and kind of consumer adjacent. And so we've really focused on basically building a brand that people can recognize, and making sure that we can kind of spread the story of what's going on in the kind of dyes and colorants industry, textile industry currently, and how we can provide a solution for a more sustainable solution for the dyes and colorants that up until now there hadn't really been too much of a ecological solution before.
Yeah, I think I wasn't aware until we signed with Huue and we started looking into that there was this ecological problem with dyes. So I think definitely like educating the market about why it would be important to buy a more sustainability produced denim is a smart move. Talk to me about sort of your advisory board. It's quite a panel of folks. I had mentioned earlier Adriano Goldschmied. He's the godfather of denim of AG Jeans. How did you like pull this group together, the Bolt Threads CTO, and how has that helped you to sort of grow in the market and kind of understand the path for the company?
Yeah, so I think we've been lucky to get a lot of really great people kind of on our advisory board. We kind of built it over time, especially based off of like what we felt like we needed, what kind of expertise we needed at the time. And if you kind of look at it as a whole, I would say it's like kind of a reflection of like who we are as a company a little bit in terms of like what our focuses are. For example, I think like our first advisor, I think our first advisor was my PI from grad school, John
Yeah,
Duber, who we kind of lean on for scientific and bioengineering kind of help. We're connected to Adriano Goldschmied because we really wanted to be kind of like deep in the kind of industry of our first product, Indigo.
yeah,
And I think we have David Breslauer on our advisory board as well. I think his comments are always very relevant and very helpful, given that he's also in like kind of a startup and has founded a startup that is in the kind of intersection of science and fashion,
yeah.
and that's like of course very relevant to what we're doing. And we've also built out our advisory board with people in manufacturing, marketing, and kind of other areas that are really important to us as well.
How do you leverage that board? So you have a bunch of people that are really sharp in their field. You kind of bring them together. I think a lot of people listening on this call are probably emerging founders, and they're wondering how to best leverage that. So what does that look like in the day to day?
Yeah, it kind of depends on who it is. I think we probably interface with certain advisors more than others at different kind of periods of time in our kind of company history. But I would say, I think we often kind of like go to them for help when we have kind of like a bigger picture question about like what we want to do for the direction of the company, or if we have even sometimes more specific and tangible questions that we think they may have expertise in the topic and really able to help us out in a pickle potentially.
Yeah, totally. Tammy, you're the first female founder that we've had on the podcast or the webinar. I don't know what we call this series. And I'd love to hear kind of about your experience there. There's obviously a lot of fantastic female founders in the biotech industry. Do you think that's affected sort of how your company has grown, how it's been treated? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it would have been like if I wasn't like a female founder, because I think there's like no control
Yeah, that's
experience,
fair.
right? So like I'll never know. But I think it's been really great to see kind of all of these other women and people of color in kind of leadership and STEM in the startup world. And it's really great to see kind of like the industry kind of growing that way. And I think one thing, maybe more tangibly, that we've kind of noticed or heard back about is that I think like Michelle and I have heard from, especially kind of our recruiting efforts, that it's kind of encouraged kind of women to apply a little bit more
Yeah.
to our roles, because they see that it's kind of led by two female co-founders, and I think that's really really great for us to hear, because we always want to promote kind of like other like female scientists, male scientists as well, but we want to like kind of like foster a good community for our team as well.
Yeah, totally. I guess maybe on the subject of fostering community, we talked about this a little bit in our kind of a pre-call. How do you think about culture at Hue and when you hire and when you're thinking about the kind of company you want Hue to be as it grows?
Yeah, that's something that is really, I think, top of mind as we do kind of like grow, have been growing in the past and are continuing to grow in the future. I think we really value having a company where everyone feels included and seen and heard, and where everyone feels empowered to like
Yeah.
reach up and do the best that they can. And I think we have come up with a set of kind of like company values of kind of like inclusivity, listening to others, being curious about other people and other ideas, new ideas, and really kind of like, while still kind of like striving for excellence and making sure that we're kind of putting our best foot forward. I think culture is something that without like dedicated thinking can sometimes slip by the wayside, I think. And so that's
Yeah.
something that we really try to focus on, especially when we're hiring new people.
Yeah. Are those like I guess at Benchling, as I've seen it grow, the values, our cultural values, been top of mind, and we kind of reiterate them often. Is that something that you're
Mhm.
doing? Is the team reminded of that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think as we're still small, I think we're about 12 people right now.
Yeah.
We want to get into a better cadence of like how do we reiterate and reinforce these values. I think every time there's a new hire, there's like an onboarding process. We do kind of talk through what our team norms are and what our company values are, and we're trying to get into a rhythm of kind of reinforcing that at a regular cadence, whatever that would be.
Yeah. Can you talk? So I think Huue is sort of coming out of the academia and then, starting to grow, and then the COVID pandemic hit. How was
Mhm.
that how did that impact the company?
Yeah, it was definitely rather challenging. I'm sure it was challenging for kind of companies of all sizes and all types. It was I would say for us it was challenging because we had just kind of raised a seed round like 2 months before the pandemic hit, and so we had just like hired a couple of people to get things off the ground,
Yeah.
and then since we are very lab-based company and kind of like bench work is very
Yeah,
important for us to like
definitely.
make kind of like scientific progress. It was a little bit of a blow to just then be like shut down for several months, and then go into like a kind of a hybrid situation for many months after that. It was definitely pretty scary. But we tried to take the time to really see what we could do on the like non-bench work side, which is always another thing that can slip by the wayside if unless you kind of like carve out time for it. So we had automatically carved out time for like doing things like coming up with team values and
Yeah.
really coming up with a good infrastructure for like how are we going to run the company, how are we going to have data stored, and what are and take some time to read papers and things like that. And so we tried to make good use of it, but it was it was an
Non,
interesting time.
I think for all of us.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think that maybe the big elephant in the room right now is like the general macroeconomic conditions. What are your thoughts on sort of the current state of the market, what that might mean for present founders, for future founders?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we try to just, at least for us, we just try to go with whatever. Um, I mean, I think market conditions can come and go and be up and down, and I think we just try
Yeah.
to like do the best we can and try to prepare maybe like a little bit for the worst, but try to just like go about as business as usual. I think as we can, and I think yeah, things may be a little bit slower or like tougher in difficult times or in different at different times, but I think yeah, we just try to persevere. And I think for other founders out there, I think it's like, well, I think if you have an idea that really like you're you want to persevere on, then I think
Yeah.
it may be more difficult. But
Yeah. Maybe just a time to be really heads down.
yeah.
So I guess one question I'd love to hear about is sort of what do you imagine like for the future of Hue? What is like
Mhm.
the 2 or 3 or 5 year roadmap look like? Am I going to start seeing tags in stores that let me know that these are sustainably dyed jeans? Like, just kind of what is that vision?
Yeah, so we are really focused on kind of our first product right now, as well as kind of doing some initial kind of proof of concepts and R&D on kind of a pipeline of other colors. For our Indigo first product, we are really focused on scaling up the technology and making sure it's robust. And I think that's one thing that is taking a lot of probably my brain space and a lot of the
Yeah.
team's brain space as well. And we are hopeful that I think in the near future we may be able to see some hue dyed denim out in the market. And then as for kind of like 5 years, 10 years, like later on the line, I think we are hoping to kind of roll out new products as well, new dyes for textiles or other industries as well in the future. In kind of a similar roadmap as our first product.
Yeah. I have to ask, so when you're working in the lab, are you staining your clothes all the time? I feel like I would be staining my clothes all the time.
It depends. I think we have people in our purification department, which is basically the when you take the fermentation broth and kind of convert it into the final product. I think one of our engineers really recently like rolled into a meeting with these like blue splattered shoes, and he's like, "Oh, I spilled some
Oh
material.
man.
That the floor is completely blue. It's madness in
Do
there."
you wear white lab coats, or are they like indigo dyed blue?
We actually recently, so one of the fun things I think about working with a dye is, so we have a dye chemist who, does some experimentation on like dye conditions, quality of the dye and things like that. And sometimes when he does, sometimes you have to do like scale things up a little bit to get good conditions
Yeah.
for dyeing. And so if he has extra dye, sometimes he'll send out a Slack and say, "Oh, it's dye party on Wednesday." And so everyone brings in, t-shirt. We've had some very artistic tie-dye happen, but we've actually dyed a lot of our lab coats blue, and so we have some like
Oh,
Huue
that is so
dyed
fun.
indigo lab coats floating around the lab.
Tammy, what is your favorite part about like being in the lab, about being a scientist?
Yeah, I don't know. I think definitely like learning new things, learning new things about the natural world, about kind of our process and things like that. I would even say like I think my favorite part of kind of my role right now is like, and being in this company is like just seeing all of the interesting contributions and new ideas from people of different backgrounds. I think one of the things that is a lot different than being in academia is that like in academia, like especially as a grad student, you have like one project, maybe you're in a whole lab full of
Yeah.
people who are a little bit more like-minded, or rather like have some more similar backgrounds, kind of working on different projects. But in the company, at least in our company, we have people of kind of varying backgrounds, like from like chemical engineering or even like dye chemistry and textiles, uh, down to kind of biochemistry, genomics, and things like that. And so it's really cool to see the problem being kind of viewed by different angles and by different expertises. And sometimes it's a little bit more of a kind of of an effort and learning curve for people to kind of speak the same language, but when it happens, and that's something that we like definitely focus on a lot. But it's really cool to see kind of everyone working together from these different perspectives.
Do you have like full team brainstorming sessions at the size you're at right now?
We do have a couple. Usually there isn't aren't too many topics that require the entire team to brainstorm on the same topic, but we definitely have, all our team meetings include everyone. We have kind of like group meetings, technical reviews, where everyone is kind of clued into what specific work streams are working on, and what are the challenges that are facing different people. And it's always really cool to see like what kinds of questions and ideas other people have, just because their perspectives are so different.
Yeah, totally. So you kind of mentioned how early on when it was you and Michelle, you were sort of sharing a lot of responsibility and it was a little more fluid, and now you sort of have your respective tasks that you're working on. What is like a typical day in the life today for you? And then another question I like to ask is sort of like, what routines or habits do you kind of practice that make you successful in those days?
Yeah, I would say for me, most of my days are maybe a lot of meetings, I guess, in the literal sense. But I would say like I as kind of like as the CEO, I kind of keep tabs on and try to advise different scientific work streams, whether it's people working on the kind of microbial engineering side, or all the way down to kind of like the product and the purification of and the quality of the product. And so I am usually kind of meeting with people and brainstorming different solutions, and trying to see what challenges they're facing and try to remove challenges, and try to keep us kind of on track to our goals of kind of like making products, scaling up, and things like that. And then also, since we're pretty small, I would say Michelle and I both have a lot of kind of like random like co-founder startup kind of things, that
Webinars.
that we do. Webinars, yes. Recruiting, I think, is of course a big one. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's like kind of interesting, like building out a lab space. I think things like that. Talking with partners and brands. Yeah.
totally. Any like habits or things that you do to sort of keep you on track and keep you successful?
I don't know. I try to sleep. I think one thing that I try to do every morning is make this green smoothie that it has 16 ingredients, which it sounds very overwhelming, but it's actually very fast, and I think it's a good way to start the day.
I uh I use athletic greens, which is like a powdered green smoothie. I think yours is probably healthier, but I don't know.
Yours sounds easier.
Mine is easier. You just mix it in,
Yeah,
mix it
perfect.
with a fork. Um, Tammy, what's the best advice you've ever received? Maybe specifically about your kind of founder journey, about being in industry.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think about the most is, especially as we're kind of growing as a team, is that um, I think having more people is like really really helpful, and like people are kind of the company's most important asset, and developing people is one of the like best, I think most rewarding investments, but also like really really important for kind of the success of the company. I think in as a grad student, it's like, okay, it's just me doing everything, but I think as I've kind of like gone through this startup journey, it's like, oh, like having all these people with different backgrounds and expertises is so great and helpful. And yeah.
Yeah, as you become sort of a people manager, like how have you learned to be good at that? Because I guess coming from academia, you're not really doing that very often.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit kind of like learning on the job. I would say like two things that have helped a lot. I think, well, two people that have helped a lot. I think one is that I think I lean on Michelle a lot for kind of like mentoring me on like the ways of management
Yeah.
and business, and how companies work, and what are like um, functional and dysfunctional kind of like situations, and how to deal with them. And so we have a lot of kind of like brainstorming sessions, or kind of like advice sessions where we talk about how to handle different situations. And the other thing is that we have also invested in like in an executive coach, and that's
Oh,
also
cool.
been really helpful for kind of getting an external opinion and advice on different things that we may be facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, is there anything that you would maybe do differently if you were doing it again, or maybe something surprising that you learned along the way, along the journey?
Yeah, I think as for if I would do anything differently, I think I would say like uh, in some ways like not really, just because I think at the time that I was there, like you only know what you know at the time, and you can't really see the future. So like as for like if I would have done anything differently, I think like at any point in time, right, we're all just like kind of like doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have. I think one thing that like kind of looking back, could be helpful is could have been helpful is, I think there's always kind of like pressure to like move faster and deliver things faster, and I think that's always something that I think we and maybe other like startups like struggle with, and I would say like probably like I guess try not to let these like external pressures like
Yeah,
deter you
totally.
too much in terms of like what your final goal is.
When you in order to like, I guess, stop external pressures from deterring you from the final goal, do you like track goals on some horizon? Do you do OKRs? Like, how do you keep the company focused on the objective?
Yeah, that's something that we I would say like I've been kind of it's been a bit of a journey for me, because I think this is one of the things where I was like I've been kind of like learning on the job, and kind of um, in the kind of like business sphere. Um, we do have kind of like quarterly goals. We have kind of like longer range goals that are
Yeah.
things that we communicate out to investors, and potentially are dependent on different kinds of partners that may be involved, that are kind of on the years long scale. And then we do try to like break it down into like, okay, month by month, quarter by quarter, like where should we be if we're not there? Like how do we get there? And what are goals that no longer serve us? And
Yeah,
how do we
totally.
kind of like re-navigate?
Totally. Well, awesome. This has been a great discussion. I think now we can, in each episode, we do a little game where we play like two truths and a lie. Tammy has submitted some questions to us, which I have not seen yet. And so I guess one of our techs is going to throw those questions up, and folks can vote. I feel like you have run a marathon, Tammy. I don't know. I guess my vote is probably going to be that you met Joe Biden. Folks, feel free to vote in the poll here as you go through. We're not seeing as much voting as we normally get. Is it up for people? I think you need to go to the poll on your right is actually where you do it. That's why so if you hit the poll button on the right side, you can vote in this question. Let's see. I feel like you haven't met Joe Biden, Tammy. I don't know. I think making your own ice cream and running a marathon seem appropriate. Making your own ice cream seems somewhat related to synthetic biology. We'll give it a few more minutes here as people keep voting. All right, Tammy, in a couple more votes, you can go ahead and let us know. It seems like people really think that you don't make ice cream.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I was like racking my brain for more intense or interesting kind of like things in my life.
That is okay. Which is the lie here? And maybe you could talk us through it.
I have not met Joe Biden. He actually came and visited UCSF when I was in grad school. So UCSF and Berkeley are like kind of the same program from my department. And yeah, he actually visited some of a lab over there. I have never met the
and did you make your own ice cream then?
I do, yeah. So I got really into making ice cream when I was in the kind of last years of my PhD program, and I think in one year I made 22 quarts of ice cream. And it was,
wow,
it's a good time.
Do you eat all the ice cream, or are you just like a really good friend to have because you're like delivering ice cream to people?
I think, I definitely disseminated a couple of quarts of ice cream to, or brought them to parties and things like that. Logistically, a little difficult to use ice cream, but I think I may have eaten a lot of it as well.
Tammy, what's the best ice cream in the Bay Area?
Ooh, that's a very tough question. There's so many great options. I think Bi-Rite is always a great option in San Francisco.
I live right by Bi-Rite, and it's expensive ice cream, and I buy it too much, I would say. Do you have a favorite flavor?
No, probably depends on my mood. I think a nice mint chocolate chip is can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong. A classic. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna take it over to the Q&A here. A couple of questions on the chat. I'll just sort of read them out to you, and you can take them. First question is from Anna Lee. She says, as a startup founder, you're likely to wear many hats. Are there any roles that you became passionate about unexpectedly?
I think a couple that have been especially top of mind that have been really, really interesting to kind of dive into. I think one is kind of working with kind of manufacturing partners, and that's something that we do kind of increasingly a lot of, and it's something that I hadn't really imagined or like kind of seen when I was in grad school, for example. It's definitely a kind of like a whole process, and it's interesting. It's really rewarding to see kind of the process go through.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Favorite piece of PR that's been put out about you and Huue for us to read?
Ooh, I don't know. I think we've been kind of, I don't know. I think there's probably a couple of articles out there. I think we've been really like, lucky to have really great PR, and it really kind of shows this like industry pull for the solutions that we're really working towards. But there's just Google it. I don't know.
Yeah, I would suggest folks either Google because it returns a lot, or look at the website. Hue's website is beautiful, and it has a bunch of links at the bottom. So, what would be your advice for someone who really wants to emulate your success as a startup founder?
Ooh, I don't know. I think I guess just try to work hard and get a co-founder who's really kind of like different from you in perspective and background, and will be a really, really good support system and mentor.
Totally. And then the last question here is, what is the next color to target after Indigo? I don't know if you'll tell us.
Yeah, we have a couple of interesting kind of products and color targets that are in the pipeline. Can't really say too much about it right now, but yeah, there's definitely a couple that we're particularly excited about.
I am very excited for the future of Huue, Tammy. I imagine a world where I can go into the store and all kinds of different colors are there, and they all have the Huue label right at the bottom. So that would be a really fantastic outcome, I think.
Same.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it was fantastic to talk to you, Tammy. We really appreciate it. For the folks on the line, I guess I have something to read about our next session. We're going to be taking a break from this for next month, and we'll come back in July. We'll be talking with Ashok, who is previously the director of immunology and automation of the protein therapeutics program at the Fred Hutch in Seattle, and he's now the co-founder of Link Therapeutics. All attendees are already registered, so you'll get a login email 2 weeks before the episode, and we're really excited to have you back in July. As always, thank you so much to our speaker today, and Tammy. Tammy, it was fantastic to talk to you. We really enjoyed the conversation. Folks can learn more about Huue Bio at their beautiful website or just by searching them in Google. They are hiring, and so if you're interested in a role at Huue, please look at their LinkedIn and their jobs page or reach out to Tammy. And if you want to learn more about Benchling, you can always go to benchling.com. And if you're in the startup world, with a /startups. So thank you so much, Tammy. Really appreciate it. And we hope the most success comes to you. And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, John. It's great talking to you.